1928. An airship vanished into Arctic skies. In the spring of 1928, the Italian airship Italia lifted from Kings Bay, Spitsbergen, her silver skin gleaming against a sky of drifting Arctic light. She was a vessel of ambition, commanded by General Umberto Nobile, who dreamed of tracing the very edges of the North Pole. At 106 meters long, buoyed by hydrogen and driven by roaring propellers, she was not merely a machine. She was a declaration that man could tame the polar void. Inside, the gondola hummed with the rhythm of engines and the chatter of crew. Maps lay spread across tables, radios crackled faintly, and frost etched delicate lace across the windows. Below them stretched a wilderness of ice floes and endless sea, a labyrinth where white met sky with no horizon. Men leaned out of narrow ports, staring at the crystalline desert rolling beneath. The mission carried both scientific instruments and national pride. Cameras snapped photographs, weather gauges ticked, and the tricolor flag of Italy fluttered in the bitter air. Yet every creak of the frame, every hiss of gas valves reminded them how fragile their conquest was. The Arctic was not theirs to master, it was only lending them passage. As the Italia pressed further north, the landscape became dreamlike. Vast leads of open water shone like black mirrors, while ridges of pressure ice rose like cathedrals, blue and jagged. Above it all drifted the airship, small as a moth in a cathedral, its shadow sliding silently across frozen plains. The men believed they were writing history. In truth, they were steering toward a story that would never end. One where wreckage, rumor, and whispers of a phantom airship would blur into legend. On May 25, 1928, the Italia met the Arctic on its own terms. Low clouds rolled across the ice, blotting out the horizon, while gusts buffeted the airship's vast frame. Ice rime thickened on the propellers, engines coughed, and the gondola shuddered as though gripped by invisible hands. Inside, instruments wavered, the altimeter needle danced, radios spat static. The crew huddled at windows, peering into white void that swallowed sky and earth alike. Then came the sudden lurch. A downdraft seized the ship, dragging her nose toward the frozen sea. Orders rang out, ballast released, engines strained, but the airship was too heavy, too ice-laden. With a groan like a wounded beast, the Italia struck the pack ice. Her gondola smashed, timbers splintered, and steel shrieked against frozen ridges. Men were hurled into snow and wreckage, cries muffled by the wind. In the chaos, the airship itself did not stay down. The great hydrogen envelope, torn but still buoyant, tore free from the ruined gondola. As crew clung to ice below, they watched in disbelief as the silver shape, lightened of its burden, drifted upward again, silent, spectral, carrying some of their comrades into the gray Arctic sky. No commands could recall it. The wind bore it away, shrinking into mist until it vanished like a ghost swallowed by cloud. What remained on the ice was wreckage, wounded men, and silence broken only by the groan of pressure ridges. For the survivors, the expedition had become not a conquest, but a struggle to live in a land that erased mistakes without mercy. Yet for those who glimpsed the floating hull drifting into fog, another story began. That the Italia never truly fell, but continued its voyage unseen. The crash left chaos strewn across the floes. Snow was stained with oil, crates splintered, and the twisted gondola lay half-buried in pressure ridges. 9 men had been cast onto the ice, battered but alive, their breath rising in clouds against the Arctic wind. Around them, the white void stretched without end. No landmarks, no shelter, only the wreckage that had nearly killed them. The survivors gathered what they could: canvas from torn bunks, tins of pemmican, a few salvaged instruments. With these, they fashioned a camp on the drifting floes, christened grimly as the Red Tent after its canvas dyed with the blood of injuries and the rust of fuel. Each night, the polar wind clawed through seams, rattling the thin barrier that separated life from the deep freeze. Men huddled in furs, frost thickening in their beards, listening to the groans of ice shifting beneath them. Their only link to the world was a portable radio. Days of static yielded nothing but silence, until at last faint signals crackled back, a lifeline across thousands of miles. The outside world now knew the Italia had fallen. Rescues were promised, but in the drifting Arctic, promises moved slower than the ice. As food dwindled and wounds festered, hope became rationed like bread. Each sunrise revealed fewer men standing, each night stretched longer than the last. Yet above, some swore they saw it. The pale shape of the airship's envelope drifting far on the horizon, a phantom reminder of the machine that had abandoned them. Whether hallucination born of frostbite or a true ghost in the sky, the vision haunted every eye that turned north. For the stranded crew, survival meant patience, courage, and the will to believe that the Arctic had not already chosen their grave. News of the Italia's fall spread swiftly across Europe, carried by the fragile signals of radio operators who caught fragments from the drifting Red Tent. Soon, nations far beyond Italy's borders pledged aid. The Arctic, once a stage for competition, became a theater of desperate cooperation. From Norway, Sweden, and the Soviet Union, icebreakers and aircraft were dispatched. Even explorers who had once been rivals, Roald Amundsen among them, rallied to the cause. But the Arctic is no ally. Rescue planes were forced down by fog, icebreakers halted by floes thicker than walls, and ships diverted by storms that shredded sails and bent steel. Messages leapt across continents, reporting sightings, rumors, and pleas. But each day on the ice eroded hope. Amundsen himself vanished into the same white void while searching for the survivors, his plane never returning. One disaster had multiplied into many. In the cities of Europe, newspapers printed breathless headlines. Photographs of the stranded crew circulated, gaunt faces huddled beneath canvas, their eyes hollow but still alive. Public imagination caught fire. Crowds debated in cafes, families whispered over breakfast tables, all waiting for a word from the north. The Arctic, usually distant and abstract, had entered their homes through the wireless, binding them to men marooned on shifting ice. Every signal from the Red Tent was treated like prophecy. A crackling voice reporting, "We still live," became headline news. Yet each message also reminded the world of the silence from those carried away with the drifting envelope. Had they perished, frozen in the sky? Or were they still aloft, unseen, their airship wandering as a pale ghost among the clouds? Hope endured, but it was shadowed by loss. The Arctic had claimed explorers before, but never with so many eyes watching, so many hearts tethered to a tent of red canvas fading into white. As the weeks dragged on, the survivors endured hunger, frostbite, and despair. Yet above the endless flows, a stranger tale began to take form. Reports filtered in from hunters, trappers, and even rescue pilots, glimpses of a silver hull drifting in the Arctic haze, a shape enormous yet soundless, sliding across the clouds like a ghost. On the ice, some of the stranded swore they saw it too, a pale silhouette at the horizon, vast and silent, as though the Italia herself lingered above them. At times, the vision seemed so near that men reached for flares, believing salvation hovered overhead. But when the light faded, the sky was empty. Elsewhere, ships at sea reported strange lights moving across the polar twilight. Fishermen off Norway claimed to hear a low hum passing above their masts, vanishing into fog. To skeptics, these were illusions born of exhaustion, mirages shaped by ice crystals and weary minds. Yet the sightings multiplied, carrying the myth of a phantom dirigible that refused to die. Newspapers seized on the legend. Illustrations of ghostly airships haunted their pages, suggesting that part of the Italia still drifted, crewless, across the Arctic wastes. For families of the missing, the stories brought a cruel hope that their loved ones had not perished but soared forever in silence. The Arctic sky became a stage for phantoms, half real, half imagined. Whether mirage, hallucination, or something stranger, the dirigible that would not fall lingered in memory, fueling whispers that machines, like men, can leave ghosts behind. After more than a month adrift, salvation finally pierced the Arctic silence. On June 12, 1928, a Soviet icebreaker sighted the faint glow of a red canvas tent against the endless white. The survivors staggered out, thin, frostbitten, and hollow-eyed, yet alive. Relief crews rushed across floes, hauling them aboard, wrapping them in blankets, pressing hot mugs into trembling hands. For a moment, the long nightmare seemed to close. But not all were saved. Many had been lost during the crash, their bodies swallowed by sea and ice. Others, those borne away in the drifting envelope, were never seen again. Families waited for names, clinging to lists of survivors, scanning for the word found too often: it was missing. Europe rejoiced at the rescue, but grief hung equally heavy. The mission had begun as triumph of science and daring, and it ended as tragedy multiplied. Lives lost, legends born, even the great Amundsen gone in the search. Yet the survivors' return did not silence the rumors. Whispers of a silver airship still drifting in fog lingered, a reminder that not all had been recovered. For Noble, the commander, survival became its own burden. Accused of abandoning men, haunted by critics and memory alike, he spent the rest of his life defending choices made on the ice. The Phantom Dirigible followed him too. Every retelling of the Italia's fall seemed to raise it again, gliding silently across the Arctic sky. Rescue brought life, but not closure. The Arctic had given back only part of its prize, leaving the rest to float forever in uncertainty. wreck of the Italia was left scattered across the Arctic, buried by snow and shifting ice. Survivors returned home, their faces etched with frost and grief, while the families of the missing were left with silence. The official reports declared the airship destroyed, its crew either saved or dead. But in the years that followed, the story did not end. From the fjords of Norway to the trawlers of Murmansk, whispers told of a pale shape gliding across polar skies. Hunters in Greenland described a silver whale in the clouds. Pilots spoke of radar echoes with no source, shadows that drifted across their instruments only to fade. Some dismissed these as tricks of weather, reflections of light in the high Arctic. Yet the timing, the details, and the persistence of the tales gave the Phantom Dirigible a life of its own. Poets and journalists seized upon the legend. The image of a vast, crewless airship adrift in fog became a symbol of ambition overreaching, of men who sought to master the pole but instead joined its silence. In time, the Italia ceased to be only a machine of canvas and hydrogen. It became myth, a ghost in the Arctic twilight, forever drifting above the frozen sea. Today, long after the last survivor is gone, the legend remains. Travelers crossing the polar night still glance skyward, half expecting to see a pale hull sliding across the star. Whether mirage, memory, or haunting, the Phantom Dirigible endures. As a reminder that the Arctic keeps its mysteries aloft as surely as the sea keeps its wrecks below.